Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming at tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Helen Davidson. I'm the Mayor of Moreland City Council and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to tonight's council meeting. In recognising our great city, I pay my respects to the local Indigenous people of Moreland by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. Offer my respects to the Wurundjeri elders past and present and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Members of the gallery, please note this meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during this meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder, in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interests of the local community and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles of leadership and good governance to secure public confidence in the office of councillor. At the council meeting held last week on the 14th of June, council voted to adjourn the meeting until 6 p.m. tonight, Friday the 23rd of June. So councillors, could I please have a motion to resume the council meeting? Moved by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? I declare that carried. So for those members in the gallery and those people live streaming at home, this is a resumption of the meeting that we had last week, and question time and petitions were heard at that meeting. So there will be no questions or petitions from the gallery at this meeting. And I'll just briefly introduce the councillors and officers in attendance tonight. Councillors in attendance tonight are Councillor Natalie Abood, Councillor Sue Bolton,
Hi.
Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon, Councillor Samantha Ratnam, myself, Councillor Helen Davidson, Councillor John Kavanagh,
Good evening.
Councillor Dale Martin,
Evening.
Councillor Mark Riley,
Hello.
and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. And the officers in attendance tonight are the Chief Executive Officer, Narina De Lorenzo, Director of Corporate Services, James Scott, Director of City Infrastructure, Grant Thorne, Director of Planning and Economic Development, Kirsten Costa, Director of Social Development, Arden Joseph, Executive Manager of Organisation Development, Anita Craven, and Manager and Property and Governance, Olivia Wright. And I will note that Councillor Ali Afrani has just arrived as well.
Evening.
Now, councillors, I note that Councillor Tapanos has an approved leave of absence, which was granted at the last council meeting, so he's not here tonight. And as there's no other apologies, I'll just move on to the declaration of interest or conflicts of interest to declare.
Yes.
Councillor Kavanagh?
I'm not sure if this matter was dealt with at the last meeting or not, but nomination nom 2817, installation of disabled parking bays. I'm not sure if that was dealt with or not.
No, it wasn't.
Okay, so can I declare a conflict on that, as the person who would benefit from this is my cousin?
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. So we'll move on to the presentation of officer reports, and I will ask if councillors would like to move some of those reports en bloc. I'll read through them for councillors so that they're aware of which ones they are. So we've got Zero Carbon Evolution Strategy, the annual report on 2016-2017 achievements and outcomes of the Midway Delivery Review. The Environmental Sustainable Development Annual Achievements Report for 2016-2017. The Moreland Parklet Program. Amendment C169, Advertising and Club Signage in Open Spaces and Reserves. Plan Melbourne for 2017 to 2050, the update Metropolitan Melbourne Planning Strategy. The Assembly of Councillors record for the 1st of April to the 30th of April 2017. The Sister City request. The Financial Management Report for the period ended the 30th of April 2017. The General Valuation, the Procurement Policy Annual Review. The Construction Management Update and the Review of Road Management Plan 2013, and the feasibility of implementing 40-kilometre speed limit in area bordered by Moreland Road, Tullamarine Freeway, Reynard Street and Moonee Ponds Creek, and lastly the proposed parking restrictions on Sages Road in Glenroy. Councillor Riley?
I'm happy to move that, except for the Plan Melbourne one, if we could, and unless anyone else wishes to nominate anything else, please.
Yep.
Proposing some amendments at Plan Melbourne.
Okay, all right. So I'll note that they're removing that one from the en bloc ones. Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to remove a couple from the en bloc ones. The Moreland Parklet program, the advertising and club signage, and the construction management.
So if there's a seconder, I'm happy to move the others. What did you want to know?
I also just the 40k an hour.
Okay. So is there a mover who would like to move those en bloc items?
Yes.
Councillor Riley, is there a seconder? Councillor Abood.
Can I just speak to that briefly? Given that we're actually saving time on a number of items and that we've had extra time to read them or reconsider them, I think it's good practice if we've actually agreed with these reports. But I do want to acknowledge the effort and the good work that's gone into them, and that I do encourage. There are a couple of actually good reports there that I'd encourage the public and our residents to read because they are important. But given that they're not contentious and that they're all supported, I think it's a good practice, especially when we're having meetings that are probably going something like 100% beyond our normal 4-hour allocation. So that's why I'm standing to move that tonight. But I do encourage people to read them and thank all the officers and those people who participated, whether they be councillors or the residents, in preparing those reports.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood, do you wish to add anything?
No, Dad.
No? Okay, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. So we'll now move on to DED 4417, Moreland Parklet Program.
Housing. We defer that.
Sorry,
No,
okay. Perhaps, yeah, we'll revert back to the agenda and we'll start from the start.
Yeah.
That's probably a better way forward. Okay, yes. Okay, so we've got the affordable housing site selection and establishment. Councillor Ratnam?
I'd like to move a procedural motion that we defer this item to a later meeting. If I have the leave of council, I'm happy to speak to it.
Sure. Councillor Riley?
Seconded.
Yep. Councillor Ratnam, do you wish to say anything further?
We've had some discussion. We believe that we need some further discussion and a bit more deliberation on this. So we think it's in the best interest, given the significance of this motion, that we defer this to a later meeting so that we have time to have that further discussion.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. The next item on the agenda is the Brunswick Music Festival and Sydney Road Street Party. Is there a councillor that wishes to move this? Is this the one where there was...
Didn't we do this?
I don't believe we've done this.
No,
I'm happy to move it.
Yeah?
Just a query. I just wanted to ask a query if that was okay. I believe we intended to defer this to pending the financial reports.
Oh, yes.
That was my understanding as well. Okay, is there a councillor that wishes to put that procedural motion to defer it forward?
Oh, I'm happy to do it again. I'll keep
Councillor
deferring.
Riley? Is there a seconder? Councillor Abood.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll put the procedural motion to defer it to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. So the next one on the agenda is CB Smith Reserve Sport and Recreation Facilities Management Plan for 2017. Is there a councillor who wishes to move that report? Councillor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon. Councillor Bolton, do you wish to speak to it?
I don't wish to speak to it at this point in time. I mean, I think it is good that we, review this this policy, this management plan from time to time, especially because there are such strong competing needs for this oval, and especially given the premiering of the premier sports teams' usage of this particular reserve. I think and also as the numbers are increasing at the Faulkner Soccer Club, I think we need to periodically review this management plan, but I think I'm happy with it for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Carly Hannon, do you wish to speak to it? That's okay. Councillor Kavanagh?
Could I put an amendment to that end, that point 3, that each year invite all 3 tenant clubs to submit their views of the management plan, and for that to be reported to councillors at a briefing.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh.
I
Councillor...
support that.
Yep.
Can we just, have you got the words? Sorry, can we just make sure we've got the words?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. And whilst we're checking those words, I'll just check Councillor Bolton, were you agreeable to that?
Yeah.
And Councillor Carly Hannon,
Yes.
you're agreeable to that as well? Okay. So the words are just being typed on the screen. Are there any further speakers on this? Yep. Okay. That's okay. I think we can continue. Councillor Ratnam?
I just want to thank everyone who's put in so much work, all the clubs that use the facility, all the officers for the background work to get to this, what looks like a very comprehensive management plan. I want to thank all the clubs who've also raised issues with us in the past, because by raising these issues, we've become more aware of the need to create a sort of more dynamic plan for the facility. It's one of our premier facilities. It's something we're really, really proud of. And I know one thing that the Faulkner Soccer Club has been talking to us about is how to ensure that it's been a really good lesson for us as well, and we've had a lot of learnings from it going into the future in terms of these facilities. Hopefully we'll have more into the future, but how do you create facilities which are shared use but also personalised to all those clubs and groups that are sharing that facility, so that they don't become clinical settings, but they're actually lived in and are equally shared in terms of space, memorabilia, etc. So I want to thank all the people who've brought those matters to our attention. I think it's paved the way for us thinking about formalising those agreements, and we look forward to seeing how it's working. And I commend the amendment too, because I think we need to review it annually to ensure that it remains dynamic and it leaves room for improvement if there are improvements necessary. So thanks to everyone involved. It's a really good piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Are there any further speakers on this? Councillor Bood?
Yeah, just quickly, I'd like to commend Councillor Kavanagh on his amendment, point 3 to... I think this will combat some of the bumps in the road, which we've experienced with all of our clubs, and I think it's quite important for the tenants to be involved in a conversation about the management.
Thank you, Councillor Bood. Councillor Kavanagh?
Just to say that Councillor Carly Hannon and I and officers attended a meeting at the facility a number of weeks ago with all 3 tenant clubs, and it was a very beneficial meeting. I know we had a meeting here with one of the tenant clubs in these, but to have all 3 around the table, and many of the suggestions that have been included in this management plan have come out of that meeting. So thanks to the officers for taking up the concerns of some clubs. For example, cleaning was a concern, and so that's been dealt with on the in the management plan. So appreciative of their work.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any further speakers on this? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote with the amendment included. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Now, the next one on the agenda is Weechef Community Hub, revised concept plan and preliminary business. Is there a councillor that wishes to move this? Councillor Kavanagh?
I'd like to move a deferral of this, please, just so we can have another look at that.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Ratnam.
Can I ask the reasons?
I want to have a look at the plans in a bit more detail. I want to find exactly how big the library is compared to what the current library is, and ensure that that's going to fit what we want for the future. I'm not saying it's not currently, but I'm still unsure of the actual square meterage of the library.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And my understanding is that there isn't any financial implications for this or a time frame set. So I'll put the procedural motion for a deferral forward. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Sorry, John.
That's all right. No, that's fine. No, good on you.
Now,
Deferred too many things tonight.
No, yeah, I know. I understand that. No trouble.
Sorry.
Block on block. Right, okay, now we're just going to this.
okay, so Councillor Elfrani?
I'd like to move DD 4417, the Moreland Parklet program.
Thank you.
I have a second, I'm happy to speak to it.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Martin.
Well, what an exciting program. I want to congratulate the Economic Development team who are fostering a fantastic environment for the small business community in Moreland. Many of you would be aware that there is a parklet already up in operation just off Lygon Street. I forget the side street that it's on, but utilises the car park space for tables and chairs for residents to enjoy, to really change the feel of the street, the feel of the cafe, who may not have access to on-street seating, especially on Lygon Street since it's such a narrow street. So happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Councillor Elfrani. Councillor Martin.
Just echoing Councillor Farnley's comments, this is such a fantastic program, and really businesses that are out there, if they're interested in this program, please get in touch with us here at Council, whether it's a short-term or a longer-term parklet. I think the benefits to this to the traders and also to the community as a whole, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I really encourage everyone to investigate it and to really join in on the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Bolton.
I've decided I'm going to speak against this, partly because my worry with this program, in some ways it sounds really great, but I feel that this is the privatisation of public space. And I know there is a little clause in there which does indicate the responsibility of the business is that it doesn't necessarily or it shouldn't move on members of the public who might sit down there. But I actually suspect in reality, I mean, that's not really able to be policed. And I actually do worry about the fact that around Melbourne and other big cities in Australia, there seems to be a vanishing of public seating and replacement with seating where you have to pay to have a coffee or pay to eat or whatever. And I sort of feel as if this is a further encroachment on that idea. I can understand Councillor Farnley, yes, it might be exciting to have little parklet spots around the place, but I'd like to see them as public places rather than business owned or business leased and business operated spaces, because I think, I really, that's my impression from reading the documentation that's been provided with this report. So while I'm a bit attracted towards the proposal, I've decided I'm going to vote against.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any other speakers on this report?
Happy to close it if you like.
Yes.
Just a bit of a misconception there. It actually retains as council land. We're just utilising a car park instead of as a car park, putting some tables and chairs for people to have a coffee on. So we're still retaining the land. We're not selling it to anybody. The business is actually leasing out that particular space. But to give everyone further assurance, I'll ask the Economic Development and Director to comment on Councillor Bolton's notion.
I don't think it's appropriate for directors to enter into debate.
Should I enter? Okay, I'll ask the question then. Is it public? Does it remain public open space, or are we privatising this land through the parklet program?
Okay, as a question, then I'll turn to the director.
Actually, I'll respond to that.
Yeah,
So just by way of confirmation, so the proposal is not to sell the land. We're just answering a question. We won't make any further comment on.
Question. There's an element which was missing in my. I mean, given that the debate has been, the closing was not a true closing; it was a question. The report clearly states that while the land will be retained by the council, it will be operated by private businesses.
Councillor Bolton, as you've already spoken,
Yes, but the conclusion asked for more entry into the debate.
Okay.
So that's really, I think that should be, that's not how closure of debate occurs, according to meeting rules.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move on from there. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Okay, so the next item is Amendment C169, advertising club signage on open space reserves. Is there a councillor that wishes to move this report? Councillor Carly Hannon. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ali Afrani. Is there any speakers for this?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly to it.
Councillor Carly?
So the council officers have worked very hard with the community clubs to try and resolve a lot of their concerns around the club signage. Unfortunately, it became quite a difficult issue because even though it really is around sporting clubs and open space, it actually became a planning matter. So I think what we are, trying our best now to come up with a solution that hopefully the state government will support, and that will allow us to proceed in a way that all of the community clubs are happy with.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Afrani, do you wish to
No,
move
thank you.
further? Are there any further speakers on this? No, in that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And the next one is Plan Melbourne 2017 to 2050. Councillor Ratnam is on her feet.
Yes, I would like to move the report recommendations with a few amendments, which are as follows. These were circulated last week to councillors, so that they are to add 3 new points. So to add a new point 4, that council welcomes a discussion on increasing the supply of social and affordable housing, however is concerned about the current models being employed by the state government in public housing renewal projects, where the majority of dwellings are being built for the private market with only a very limited increase of public and social housing. At a new point 5, that while council welcomes a discussion in Plan Melbourne about inclusionary zoning, it notes that attempts by council to include a 20% affordable housing requirement in the Brunswick Structure Plan were refused by the Andrews State Government, and our previous attempt at 20% affordable housing in the Coburg Activity Centre were rejected by the state-appointed planning panel. Council calls on the state government to be consistent in future between its aspirational plans like Plan Melbourne and decisions made by the planning minister, and to reconsider and approve future requests by council for minimum social and affordable housing provisions in its major activity centres. At a new point 6, that council is concerned about several references in Plan Melbourne about a new streamlined planning process and the potential for these new processes, such as those currently employed for the public housing renewal projects, to exclude local councils from having a decision-making role and thereby exclude meaningful community engagement and consultation.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton, do you wish to speak to... Oh, sorry, I might ask Councillor Ratnam to speak first and then Councillor Bolton.
Well, we welcome strategic work from the state government that's looking at the big picture in terms of what's happening to the future of our cities, looking at population growth and infrastructure growth. Plan Melbourne has some great aspirational plans, and as the amendments highlight, there are some really welcome developments in Plan Melbourne, and I know our officers over the years have been involved in dialogue with the state government to try and influence it to ensure that Moreland's needs, along with everyone else's needs, are accounted for. And it's looking like a good aspirational document. However, there are a few concerns, and I think what councils like ours need are greater consistency between aspirational plans and the reality of decisions that are made for our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Bolton, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I'd like to speak to this. I think these amendments to the report are very, very important. I think in particular the new point 4 about the majority of dwellings in the public housing renewal projects being built for the private market with only a very limited increase of public and housing, social housing. And I think actually as you start to investigate these renewal projects more and more, it actually looks like a massive handout to developers, to private developers, and public tenants won't be guaranteed to be able to return, and those that are returned, allowed to return, may not have access to public housing. It may be turned into community housing at with a higher rent. Secondly, on the new point 6 that's being proposed by Councillor Ratnam, I'm very concerned about this. I haven't gone into great depth on the issue of what is basically a privatisation of elements of the government's planning scheme, and I gather there's a target of trying to get 30% of applications to be dealt with in a fast-tracking process without the right of public notification, appeal, etc., etc. So I'm actually, I haven't gone into all of the details of this, but actually I'm very, very concerned because there hasn't really been much in the media about exactly what's being proposed with this privatisation of the process, and the amendment starts to look at some of those aspects, although I think we could probably go further as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh?
Just to say that I'm supportive of the amendments as well, and I thank Councillor Ratnam for putting those up. I think they make our response much stronger and much more appropriate to previous decisions by this council that have made it very clear what we want as far as affordable housing and things of that nature. So I congratulate her on the amendments, and I think it makes it much stronger.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any further speakers on this? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried.
Who's against?
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice. And all those against? Councillor Frane. Thank you. I declare that carried. We'll now move on to the construction management update. Is there a councillor who wishes to move that report? Okay, Councillor Bolton. And
Well-
is there, sorry?
Yeah, sorry, you go. This should get a seconder first.
Yes. Is there a seconder? Councillor Yildiz.
Yes, I think this is quite important. Quite an important report. I think all councillors would have been contacted by residents who are having dreadful problems living at the interface between construction sites and their houses. Actually, probably not just neighbours, but also people just trying to walk along footpaths, pushing prams with mobility scooters, etc., and finding piles of rubble across footpaths, sometimes for months on end. And then the fact that, you know, residents then contact council, it's not clear which part of council they should contact, and different arms of council have different functions. So some council officers can deal with enforcement, other council officers can deal with working out whether or not everything's been complied with. So the proposal coming out of this report is for construction management plans to try and bring all of those elements of the council that need to deal with resolving these issues into one area. And hopefully this works. But certainly I'm really quite enthusiastic about this because it might resolve the fact that that people aren't sure who to contact, and different council officers don't have the power of other council officers to resolve issues when they go out on site to inspect the problems. So I'm hoping, cross fingers, that this might be a resolution. And even on some of, now this report doesn't deal with this issue, but in some of the intractable issues that happen in the interface between industrial and residential, I think, you know, maybe in the future we can sort of look at something there, because similar issues arise. Companies, industrial premises get permits, and then how do you police those permits that they're abiding by opening hours, operating hours, etc., etc. So I'm very enthusiastic that this will hopefully resolve things for at least some residents.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Yildiz, do you wish to add anything? Councillor Abood?
Yeah, I just wanted to make note of a laneway that abuts a big development, which has a neat little sign that says road closed, which can come in and out with one movement, to use it as an example of the best case scenario of good management with a construction site. So I agree that hopefully this is the best case scenario, and I think that now that that particular site has been well managed, we have a really great outcome. So I'm looking forward to the same thing happening.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Abood. If there's no further discussion from councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Now, the next report we move on to is the feasibility of implementing 40 km/h speed limits in area bordered by the Moreland Road, Tullamarine Freeway, Reynard Street and Moonee Ponds Creek. Is there, yep, Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to speak in favour of this report. This is following up from
Councillor Martin, I'll just ask for a second. Are you making an amendment or?
No.
Okay. Councillor Kavanagh?
Yep. So Thank you. So this is following from a general business item that I raised not too long ago. So I'd really like to thank officers for getting onto this really quickly for me and for the residents and the people in the community. I've spoken with a huge number of residents in and around Morris Reserve, in and around Reynard or south of Reynard, people just off Henley, people who take their kids to the kindergarten. That whole area in there, they're concerned with the speed at which people are going around, and I think this is fantastic that we're actually looking to implement this 40 kilometres an hour within the next financial year. So I highly commend this report, and I think we should be all moving it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Are there any further speakers on this? No? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And now, councillors, we're on to the notices of motion for tonight. And the first one, I believe, is from Councillor Martin, Councillor Attendance Statistics at briefings and meetings. Councillor Martin, do you wish?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just read it, the background.
Perhaps if you read the motion.
I'm happy to second.
And there's a seconder, Councillor Abood. Councillor
Okay.
Martin.
So I'll read out the background of this. So council officers invest significant time and resources in providing briefings to councillors. As a measure of good governance, transparency and integrity, attendance information should be available online without having to trawl through agendas and past minutes of past council meetings to look at the Assembly of Councillors' records. So what I'm proposing tonight is that on the website there is a table that is updated and that it has essentially a complete history of briefings and councillor meetings, and it puts up a percentage and it lets the residents know which councillors attend briefings and which councillors attend meetings. And that's how simple it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abood, do you wish to add anything?
Yeah, I'm seconding this motion because I feel like there is a direct correlation between the length of our council meetings and our UPC meetings and the amount of time spent in the briefings. I feel like the briefings give us a chance to nut out some of the detail, and I find that on occasion, trying to be very democratic about my words here, there are scenarios where when people aren't able to ask questions at the briefing, the questions get asked later on, usually during the meeting, and it makes us take 100% longer with our meeting time.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Abood. Councillor Yildiz,
Can I just ask a question? When they are listed on the website, I believe there should be some sort of reason for not attending a meeting. For example, if I'm interstate and I can't attend, I'll put an apology in. There should be some way of noting that, rather than just go apology. Or I believe there should be some excuse or some reason, because that's not fair. Because a resident could look at that, and if someone's got 15 apologies for briefings, then that could mean anything. That could mean the fact that they just didn't turn up, or the child was ill, or they had a commitment. I've got a commitment every Monday. Makes it really hard for me, and I'm sometimes interstate, so I can't come to briefings. I made that clear at the start of the year. So I'm just wondering if there could be some sort of amendment.
So, Councillor Hughes, are you asking for an
I'm
amendment?
asking for an amendment that to include reasoning. I don't know what the terminology would be, but we need to probably be careful on how that would be worded. But rather than just an apology, can it be an apology then in brackets reason?
Do you want me to respond to
Yes,
that?
because you might, if
so-
it would be called on you to
So
agree to that, or...
I don't want to amend this. For me, it's pretty black and white. You're either at the briefing, you're at the councillor sitting around the chamber, or you're not. I believe that apologies are just used as excuses, and I'm not having a go at any councillors in particular, but I do believe that officers spend a lot of time putting together briefings and putting together reports, and if we're not here, it's not good governance. And so for me, it's either you're here or you're not. And, at the end of the day, this is just information that's already in the reports, and the residents can make their own decision as to whether or not they support this. But at the end of the day, if in 2 years' time there's one or two councillors that's attended 10 meetings and every other councillor has attended 300 meetings, I think that the residents deserve to know about that.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Now, Councillor Yildiz.
Can I move an amendment?
No,
Like
hang
an
on a
amendment
second.
as
So,
well.
Councillor Yildiz, because that hasn't been incorporated by Councillor Martin, I'll call for a seconder for your amendment. So, is there a seconder? So, Councillor Carly Hannon. All right. So now we're debating this section of the proposed amendment, what Councillor Yildiz has put up. So, is there any further debate on this, Councillor Abood?
Yeah, so I'm talking to the amendment, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so on Wednesday night, I didn't come to a briefing. I didn't come to a briefing because I was exhausted because I'd been at ALGA with a few other members of the council, and I'm more than happy to wear that. I think that I put in, I think that every single week I go above and beyond in terms of the hours I'm expected to dedicate towards being a councillor, and I'm happy to sit with that. And I think that all of us should feel like we're happy with our commitment to the council, and it stands on our performance. So I will be voting against your amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Carly Hannon, I'll take you first as you were the second.
Yeah. So I'll speak in favour of this amendment. I believe that it provides more information to our residents, which is a really good thing. It'll be able to be then used by our residents to understand and unpack, what's going on out behind the scenes, I suppose. So that means they'll be able to know who's attending the briefings, and if they're not attending, they'll have a clearer idea of what other commitments people have. And I also think in the long term this has got other benefits to it for periods when people might have to be carers, they might have just had a child and be off for a period of time because of that, and things like that that allow us to actually have the scope to recognise that we're on for 4 years, and it is a big commitment and it's a very big time commitment, and then people need to take it seriously. However, it's also that these hours, our hours are all over the place, I suppose. Like, we're kind of on the clock all the time, and briefings are a very important part of what we do, but they are also one element of what we do. So if there is a period in which a councillor is not attending briefings for that time, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not doing their duties as a councillor representing their community.
Thank you, Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor Franey?
Councillor Martin, I'm largely supportive of this notice of motion. So I'm a bit disappointed. It sounds like we're starting to make this a bit political, but this is just about further transparency. If this is about transparency, ultimately this is creating even further transparency. We're getting into even more detail. How could that be a negative for the community? So for me, this is a common sense amendment. Why wouldn't you put some wording next to why there's an apology? There's nothing wrong with that. Councillor Tapanos at the moment is overseas. It's not too difficult to put some transparency on the website. It makes logical sense. If this is about transparency, it's just about going that next level with our residents.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ratner?
So I want to speak in favour of the amendment and the motion, and I want to speak in favour of the amendment for a couple of reasons. One is, I think the amendment is redundant because the reasons, if councillors have to make apologies, that is already recorded in the Assembly of Councillors. So we have a couple of places where attendance is recorded, both at the Assembly of Councillors and the annual report. And we have provisions in there to note when people have taken leaves of absences and if people have had to absent themselves from decisions. We don't have a provision, it has never been brought up that there should be a provision for the reason for the apology to be included. It actually has never come up, even the Assembly of Councillors report, which you would think that if it was that important for councillors to have the reason for the apology noted, that we would have moved that in the Assembly of Councillors record first, because that is the prime recording document of councillor attendance. So I think it's redundant because we already note apologies in the Assembly of Councillors and there's provisions in the annual report. This is almost like a tracking mechanism, so it's trying to get all that data and make it freely available to the community. I think by adding this element, we make it much more difficult. I'm also thinking pragmatically about this information having to be updated in sort of live time every week or every month. And in terms of the work that's required to keep this updated, I wouldn't want to add any more layers. So from a pragmatic perspective, I think it becomes unworkable if you then put layers of reasons for apology and apologies. We already have the provision to note apologies in the Assembly of Councillors in the annual report. This is to bring that, to make it more accessible to the community. So I think that if people really want to know why people aren't attending meetings, they can go to the Assembly of Council's record and can understand why. And I think we all have channels to be able to talk to the community. If there's a reason we can't attend meetings or are absent for long periods of times, we all have channels to be able to make that available to the community. So I have no problem with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Okay, so I've just got some procedural advice. The mover of an amendment doesn't have the right to reply. So, but potentially could Councillor Yildiz close the debate on the amendment?
Councillor, so just run for advice. So the mover of the amendment, which was Councillor Yildiz, doesn't have the right of reply, so wouldn't be able to close.
Okay.
Yeah, but can I make a comment though? Make a comment. I'm not going to close the debate. I want to make a comment. Further comment to my earlier comment.
Because you've already spoken, Councillor Yildiz, I'll leave that. You might be able to raise another issue in the substantive motion later on, but at this point, you're not able to make a comment or reply.
Can I just confirm that? Because in the past,
We can check the procedural.
Because in the past, movers of amendments have in fact spoken more than once.
Yeah, so just
They have spoken more than once.
so just
Many
for,
occasions.
so just for clarity, I don't think my microphone's
That's all right,
working.
that's okay.
We literally just went through the local law now, and it does state it very clearly that the mover of an amendment doesn't get to have a right of reply, which is different to when you move a normal motion. You get the right to close. Here it is, it's back. But the other thing is that, in the local law, councillors get to speak once. And, it is true that there have been sometimes practices where people have spoken more than once.
They have.
So it is something to think about how we keep debate tight.
Then
what
they're
we
not,
do to keep it tight.
I'm not having to go at the chair, but there needs to be consistency because in the past, many occasions, movers of amendments have spoken more than once on amendments. And I can tell you now, you might want to check your records, they have.
And if I have made a mistake...
No, I'm not, please don't misunderstand, it's not having to go at you. But it has happened in the past, that's all.
All right.
That's all.
Well, we'll move on. I think somebody else had their hand up over here who hasn't spoken. Councillor Martin can speak.
So I would like to speak against this amendment purely on the basis that what we're doing here is we're going to have a briefing and then a percentage, council meeting and a percentage. There's no way that you're feasibly going to be able to report every single apology since the beginning of your council term next to that statistic. This is just a simple number to provide transparency for the residents so that they don't have to go trawling through meeting minutes after minutes after minutes. I mean, this is a simple, tiny little thing that you'll see on the councillor section of the website, and it will be addressing whether or not councillors attended or they didn't. And that's it. It's really that simple.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Now, if there's no further speakers, I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that lost. So now we'll return...
I've got an amendment as well.
Okay.
So my amendment, which I've only just sent through, is that at the end of the first sentence, replace the full stop with a comma and say, what did I say? No, it's not coming up. Providing the councillor briefings are advertised and made open to the public, full stop.
Okay. Now, is that agreeable to the mover and the seconder?
No.
Okay. Now, is there a seconder for Councillor Bolton's amendment? Okay. So, for want of a seconder, I'm afraid that lapses. We'll return to the substantive motion moved by Councillor Martin. Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against this. Certainly I can understand and respect the desire of Councillor Martin for transparency and openness. But my feeling is, in the time I've been on council, that the thing that is most untransparent and unopen to the public is the confidential sections of council meetings and councillor briefings. Because also we have had at those various councillor briefings representatives of outside organisations attend those briefings, but residents don't get a chance to attend those briefings and observe. And in my opinion, even if it's not your intention, The impact of this amendment is it starts to turn council meetings into a rubber stamp. And council meetings are the meetings that are in public. We should be, all councillors, not just for urban planning committee meetings, but council meetings as well, keeping our minds open to accept new information that comes from members of the public, residents, people we're meant to be listening to and representing. And I feel amendments like this that try to make councillor briefings virtually compulsory actually take us away from or create a closed loop where we're only talking to each other and we're not talking adequately to members of the community. And I think this is the wrong direction for the council to go. And I don't believe our councillor briefings are at all transparent. I think at least council meeting attendance and all of that, and urban planning committee meeting attendance, I've got no problems whatsoever with. But I think the making of councillor briefings virtually compulsory, even though they're not compulsory in the Local Government Act, takes us in a rubber stamp direction of the meetings that are meant to be the real decision-making meetings.
Is there any other speakers? Councillor Kavanagh.
I'm going to speak in favour of the motion. And first of all, I think this council has less confidential items than any other. I think when we did the Know Your Council stats, I think we were about the least amount of confidential items of any council in Victoria. We also probably have the most open question time of any council in Victoria. I know that other councils you are not allowed to voice your question at all. And my brother at Casey had an incident there that he thought, and it showed me that this was a much more open forum. The other thing is the councillor briefings, no one's saying that that's a decision-making body. There's never been a decision made at a councillor briefing, but it is important to be informed about what items are coming up, etc. The other thing is that on the Know Your Council website, in the last time I saw, this council had a rating of only about 80% of councillor attendance, and it was entirely because of one councillor that hadn't attended any meetings. So we all had to look as though we were one of the lowest attending council attendance at council meetings because of the failings of one councillor. And I wasn't involved in the election of that councillor. I don't think I should be branded for being, non-committed to my role simply because somebody else isn't.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Ratton.
I too would like to speak to this motion, and I want to respond to Councillor Bolton's assertion that in some way this motion was making briefings compulsory. I don't equate the two, and I don't think this motion in any way makes briefings compulsory. Briefings are not compulsory, and it is the prerogative of councillors to determine if they wish to attend briefings or not, if they find them useful or not. However, what this is doing is increasing the transparency of attendance. If councillors feel compelled to attend meetings because the public are going to know that they're not attending because this is going to be reported, that does not make the meetings compulsory. That is another part of thinking. If councillors are fearful of people not knowing that they're not attending those meetings, that's a whole other argument separate from making briefings compulsory. This motion in no way makes briefings compulsory. It increases transparency. It holds us accountable for the job that we were elected to do.
Thank you, Councillor Ratnam. Councillor Yildiz and then Councillor
I
Carly.
appreciate you saying that, Councillor Ratnam, but 2 minutes ago you said it's a way of tracking and it's a controlling mechanism, because that's what it is. It's a controlling, micromanaging. There could be people in the meetings. There's a thing called presenteeism where people are going to sit
Councillor
around.
Yildiz, I believe Councillor Ratnam's rejecting the word controlling.
I did not use that word.
Tracking and controlling.
I didn't say control. I said it's a way of tracking attendance.
Excuse me, I apologise. You said tracking. And look, I'm not against meetings either, but I appreciate the fact you just said then that briefings are compulsory, so people can come or not. But I just feel that it should be up to councillors to make that decision. And if people have got personal issues, they've got family issues, work commitments, then they should not have to attend. And an apology should be sufficient enough, I believe. But my opinion.
Thank you. I think Councillor Carly Hannon, did you wish to speak? I saw your hand before.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this motion is certainly done in the name of transparency. I guess my only concern is when it turns to something that's competitive, and also when it sort of heightens people's anxiety. I mean, I'm somebody who really values briefings and do regularly attend them. However, I do feel like there's an element of this where it's becoming, you know, who's going to be number one, that doesn't factor in, you know, a whole range of other things that are going on in people's lives. So I do definitely believe there should be a level that people are trying to meet, but this kind of competitive table, I'm not sure whether it's the best approach.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. The briefings, you know, people can choose to come. They aren't open to the public, and I know that's a contention for some councillors around the table, but I find it actually very valuable that we can actually have fairly frank conversations, and we can look a bit stupid in those meetings, and we don't have to be on our toes. And some people might find that funny, but occasionally I do look stupid. I can assure you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's certainly about transparency, and I really find it difficult to see how this is going to be a competitive thing. What it's about is trying to lift the bar and just make it clear to people about people's attendance, and I completely concur with Councillor Kavanagh's comments around one person's ability to bring the whole of council down. And I was subject to some fairly fierce attacks about that after their first term at the inauguration, where I was attacked personally by that councillor, and I pulled my head in after that. I didn't bother having any further discussions because of that. And I just think we need to be very upfront, very clear and open about our attendance and involvement in council. You know, I'm not about to start to list all the committees and the things I do, but just about every night of my week is taken up with doing council things. I'm lucky if I get a night off. So I work well and truly above the hours that I'm expected to work, and I'll continue to do that through my 4 years, and I would urge every councillor to do it. And I think it's people's right to be able to see who's participating and not. It's not about a competition, it's about transparency. And if people wish to, you know, we're all going to have reasons why we can't come to meetings. That's normal practice. And sometimes, you know, there's a whole raft of reasons and you can make those known. But I don't believe those reasons are ever being recorded in the minutes of any meetings I've ever been to for the last 40 years, of any organisation I've been in. And I'd be interested to see this council start that practice, but I've never been anywhere where we've done it. So I kind of find it a bit odd that you want to do it. If you do have a good reason, like Councillor Tapanos did last week, or the first part of this meeting, you made it quite clear. And you can do that, and I encourage you to do that, and you should let people know why you're not around, if you're on leave or whatever it is. But you can seek leave. There are some good practices we have that allow you to take time off, and I'd encourage you to do that, particularly if you're under pressure or your health's not good, then please do seek leave and take it because you need it. We want you back.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Abood?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that my reason for seconding this motion had nothing to do with competition, because I'm not, maybe I am a bit competitive, but not in this scene. And my ideals of being part of this council, and I think it's been evident since the minute I walked in the door, is that we would all work together and it would be awesome, and we'd have our little specialist areas that we'll focus on and everything would get done. And I think that encouraging councillors to feel like they should attend as many briefings as they possibly can acts towards that end. I think that the more time we spend together, the better we know each other, the easier it is for us to understand and begin to expect what each other will do and how we can either, you know, support or disagree with all of those positions. So, it's not about a competition for me. It's about us understanding each other's intentions.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. If there's no further speakers, I'll put that to the vote. So all those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Okay, we'll now move on to the next notice of motion, and that's right. Councillor Kavanagh will just excuse himself, as this is the one where he has a conflict of interest, which he declared earlier in the meeting. This is a notice of motion that I will be moving. It's on page 794. And I'll just get to it. Okay. So the notice of motion reads that Council resolved to improve 2 parking bays in Barclay Street and 2 parking bays in Nicholson Street, Brunswick East, for the sole use of Moira Kelly's Creating Hope Foundation via the creation of a separate permit system. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to that.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. So this is in relation to the foundation which Moira Kelly has established, and I've spoken to Moira Kelly on the phone a few times about this. It's a foundation that cares for some seriously ill children, many of whom have severe disabilities. I know that she's taking care of a child from the Philippines who I believe doesn't have use of his legs, and she's experienced a lot of difficulties walking with the children from parking down the street up to the actual home. There is a bus that she uses, and she has asked that she be able to use the disabled parking out the front of the centre for her sole use, to make it easier to assist these children to get out of the car and out of the bus and into the home. She often takes them to hospital appointments, for rehabilitation appointments, and to various other specialised doctor appointments. And I think that this is a specialised approach where we need to look at this situation as an individual circumstance, where she is asking for our help for a very worthy cause that she has devoted her life to. Councillor Ratner? Oh, sorry, Councillor Yildiz? Yep.
I think this is fantastic. By the way, Barclay Street, we've just got to be consistent. I think it's spelt incorrectly in the top part of the motion. I know Moira well. I know Ahmed and Emmanuel well, and I reckon I've sent about, and I can prove all the emails, probably 7 or 8 emails about this same issue over the last probably 7 years, and nothing happened. The reason why nothing happened is the officers came back to me and said, we can't have precedence. If we do this for one person, then we're going to have to do it for a lot of others. I know exactly where this place is. I've been there maybe 10 times, and well deserved. This lady needs this because of the things that she does for the community, and very selfless is Moira. But the thing that's, I'm going to be voting for it, but the thing that disappoints me a little bit is I've sent maybe 30 emails about this, and I've had probably 10 meetings about this. We even had a meeting in my office when I was mayor with Moira and her son about this. Nothing happened. We had to wait 6 years later to do this. I'm disappointed it didn't happen earlier.
Thank you, Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Ratnam, then Councillor Riley.
Thanks very much, Councillor Davidson, for this proposal, and I understand where it's coming from, but could I please ask the mover and seconder to consider, and I urge you to consider, that we add an element of doing a survey in the street. And the reason I'm asking for that is that whenever we change parking conditions on the street, we usually conduct a survey on the street. You know, we have had surveys where the outcome has come back, saying that there's concern about the proposed restrictions, for example, if they're being introduced, but council might have made a different decision, but the process itself of doing the survey can be really, really valuable. Given this is a unprecedented thing, we have never done this before in terms of creating a new permit system to give sole use of public parking bays for essentially private use, a very worthy use, and I completely support the need for this, and we have to find a solution. I'm really keen to find a solution. However, my real concern is that if we move this resolution without doing any surveying or any consultation, we exclude the neighbouring residents who also are part of that community from being part of this decision making. So all I'm asking for is an invitation to that surrounding community to be part of the decision making and a part of the problem solving. So I'd like to propose that the motion be amended, that council resolves to conduct a survey on Barclay Street in the relevant area about council with the rest of the motion, about council allocating 2 parking bays with the new permit system. So I would ask that we do the consultation first before the decision.
Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, I think we're procrastinating on this. That portion of Barclay Street is not a busy street. The neighbours across the road, the neighbours on Moira's right, they know the work she does. Her son Ahmed has won Olympic medals in the Paralympics. The guy's got no arms. I mean, for crying out loud. The woman does an incredible amount of work, and she has for a very long time. Emmanuel's can't even walk properly, but there's a whole range of other kids that live in that house that have impairments. To drag this another 6 months or a couple more months, it's not necessary. This has been coming to council for the last, I've been on council for 10 years, and this has been coming up nearly every year. I don't understand why we need to go and do a survey, which is just going to further, add more time to the issue. It's only one car park. She's only asking for one, isn't she? One disabled park in front, two in front of the house. Well, she probably needs more, to be honest. But anyway, it's only two.
Okay, so just in terms of procedure, I'll need to see whether or not I'm agreeable to that, and then I'll put that.
Yeah, sorry.
You're
Okay, excuse
not
me.
obviously not agreeable to it. Seconder for the amendment. Yeah, so in that case, even if I was agreeable to it, we would still need a seconder to the amendment.
I'll happy to second it.
Okay, so Councillor Farney is happy to second that. So, are there any further speakers on this? On the amendment?
I'll speak to the amendment.
Yeah, Councillor Farney.
This is, I really empathise with your cause here and assisting this organisation, but it is unprecedented to allocate specific parking to a specific organisation, no matter how worthy they are, because that's all, it sets a precedent that potentially public parking can be allocated directly to particular organisations that may be favoured by particular groups within council. And before doing any moves, you should actually speak with all the relevant stakeholders on that street to make sure we review and make sure every stakeholder on the street has their say. So in the name of transparency and consultation, I'm a big fan of consultation, as many people know. Made a big song and dance about it recently. We should go out and speak to all the community about it first.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Riley.
I just stand to actually clarify the fact that the officers have said in this that the policy doesn't allow for privatisation of public parking bays, and therefore the request to make these disabled parking bays solely for the use of Moira Kelly Creating Hope Foundation is not consistent with council's existing policy. I just want to draw council's attention to the fact that we are about to review these policies in the normal course of business. I have big concerns about this, and I've had those discussions with the mover in terms of the original motion, but I think in terms of what we're learning about our consultation and engagement practices, that if this is to get up, that we do need to have this amendment in there, because it is going against our current policy, and we're about to review it. So I would hope that if there had been some solutions in the past, they would have come forward by now, but clearly there isn't. So this may be one way of getting around it, but it means having to deal with all these applications. I'd hate to think how many might come forth once this starts. I don't know how many. It won't be hundreds, I'm sure, but there will still be significant cases that we might have to deal with. So,
Okay, thank you, Councillor Riley. I think the CEO might need to
Just to clarify through the Mayor. So I just want to check, is the intention of the amendment to conduct the survey and then bring the results back to council prior to a decision? Okay. All right. So then the suggestion is for the amendment to work, the first point, rather than saying council resolves to provide, you'd say council seeks to provide, and then your amendment is to conduct the survey, and then prior to bringing it back to council. So otherwise you've made the decision in the first point, and then you're seeking to do consultation in the second point.
No, it's to replacing the
Oh,
wording.
you're replacing.
The council, it's replacing the wording. We're rewording the motion.
Okay,
essentially.
right. Okay, thank you. I thought it was an
included
additional
that,
point.
Actually, it's in there to replace the motion with.
Okay,
So it's
all right. I
rewording.
just wanted to clarify. That's not an additional point. That's a
Yes.
replacement.
And it includes the original wording from the previous resolution
Right.
in the text of the second
Okay.
of the amendment.
Yeah. Okay. And to bring the results back.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Just to clarify, well, the original motion involved 4 car parking bays.
Oh.
The amendment involves about
No, it just reads different. It's actually
Oh, 4, right. Okay.
2 in Barclay and 2 in Nicholson.
So we'll just make sure that wording is reflected in the revised amendment. It's 4 spaces.
4.
Yeah.
4 parking bays.
So is it 4 or 2?
Yeah, 4.
Two.
4
Two.
altogether, 2 streets.
Ah, okay.
2 in each street.
Okay. All right. If there's no further discussion, or Councillor Britt, did you want to speak?
I just wanted to say that I wholeheartedly support this motion and completely see where it's come from and why it's been submitted. But if I've learnt anything, and if this motion was perhaps in the North East or the North West ward, the consultation might not be such an issue. But if I've learned anything about Moreland is that people want to be consulted about what's going on in the city, especially in the South End where things are tight. And so I think the amendment is a great idea and commend the whole motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Boone. So we'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. So that has now become the substantive motion.
Yeah,
No.
we haven't voted on it.
Not yet.
We haven't voted on it.
Councillor Kavanagh is about to re-enter the room. So that's now become the substantive motion. So I think we've almost exhausted the debate on that. So I might put that to the vote. So all those in favour on the substantive motion? I declare that carried. Okay, so now we can call for Councillor Kavanagh to re-enter the room. Okay, now for the next item is the notice of motion for the enclosed off-leash dog park, and I will be withdrawing this, and the reason being is that there is a report coming to the next council meeting, and I believe that we've waited such a long time for this. It's good to know the officer's recommendations for the off-leash dog park, and additional information as well is that there is a potential grant that is available to council to support pet-friendly spaces, which I discovered whilst I was with my colleagues at ALGA. So that's been withdrawn, and we'll now move on to the Moreland City Council's ongoing support for the LGBTIQ community. And Councillor Martin is on his feet, and Councillor Riley seconded.
Thank you. So I'll read it out as it's stated in the agenda. So a person's gender or sexuality should not affect their ability to marry another or leave them subject to bullying, harassment or abuse. It has been almost 3 years since Moreland City Council first passed a motion in support of marriage equality. Since then, we have seen the issue debated federally with little action. It is clear that the easiest, least costly and least harmful way of ensuring equality in marriage is through a vote in the Parliament. This can happen tomorrow should our federal politicians wish to show leadership and take much needed action on the issue. We implore all politicians to work together and demand a free vote in Parliament to end the discrimination and the unjust prejudice of those in our LGBTIQ community. So what I'm asking for here tonight is I'm asking for 2 things. The first, acknowledging the fact that Moreland City Council is a supporter of marriage equality. We have been a supporter of marriage equality for almost 3 years now. We came out back in 2014 and said, we stand for this. People in our community stand for this, and we want to see this happen. We've seen no action at a federal level. And what we're having to do here in local government is we're having to stand up and act as a voice for the people in the community because their federal politicians are not listening to them. And we will do that time and time again when there is an issue that our community cares about and there is lack of action at other levels of government. We will stand up and support the people in our community. So the 2 things that this notice of motion is asking for is that one, is that we fly the flag, the rainbow flag, continuously until such time that marriage equality becomes law in Australia. And the second is noting and supporting the Safe Schools Coalition and becoming an official supporter of that organisation. So what I'm asking here tonight is my fellow councillors. I think some reports have come out, some newspaper articles saying that councils are becoming, members of the UN and things like that, standing up in support of these things. But we are standing up here right now because our community is demanding this. People in our community are affected by this, and we are the voice of the community at local government. So I ask that my fellow councillors support me with this notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Riley, do you wish to speak?
I just want to thank you to Councillor Martin for moving this and taking this initiative. I just want to add that the issue around the Safe Skills program was actually multilaterally supported, and then it's become quite a contentious issue, and unfortunately, and I think it just goes to show how some of the public discourse in Australia can fall into such a parlous state of discussion or lack of discussion and understanding. So I would urge Council to support this motion and to support what's going on in Safe Schools, because it's about improving people's health, improving their self-efficacy, and supporting teachers and families to support those children in schools as well as they're learning about their sexuality. So I would really urge people to support these things.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Bolton?
Just a bit earlier today, I sent around an amendment, which I'm sure will be acceptable, to add a point 10, to review council forms and procedures to ensure that they aren't discriminatory towards the transgender community.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on what forms and procedures, what are you talking about in particular?
I noticed when I joined the library recently that there's only a choice of putting down male or female. And because I think the transgender community has only really relatively recently gained more of a voice in the community, I think a lot of people are very aware of all sorts of other issues about women's rights and so forth. But I think there's less awareness about transgender issues. And I include many progressive-minded people who support LGBTI rights in that are not necessarily as well aware of transgender issues. So I had planned to move a notice of motion a couple of months ago, and then I need to reword it, and I didn't really get around to bring it back. So given that this is talk about Moreland City, the title is Moreland City Council's ongoing support for the LGBTIQ+ community, I thought it seemed appropriate. Even though it's more aimed at council, and I know the rest of the motions aimed at more the federal government and so forth, I sort of feel as if it's appropriate, but if you feel it would be more appropriate in another motion another time, that's fine as well.
I'm happy with the addition of this.
Is that agreeable to the seconder?
Yeah, it fits in with the motion we moved in December or November when I first moved a motion around LGBTIQ things. We were actually looking at what we're doing in council. I don't think it contradicts it. So I'm happy with it.
I think it needs the word council in front of forms, review council forms and procedures.
Yes,
Thanks.
Councillor Abood?
I'd like to commend Councillor Bolton on her amendment, because I think that the notion of supporting gay marriage in the community is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we need to do for our queer community. I understand that there's much more to the notice of motion, and I commend the notice of motion as well, but I think that considering that we are the inner northern suburbs of Melbourne, and Melbourne is open-minded and accepting anyhow, but we're also the cool part of Melbourne, I think, and we've got one of the most inclusive schools that I imagine I'll ever go into just down the road, and I'm saying that from what I saw at the Ida Hobbit Day celebrations, where a bunch of just free young people who were not had no external pressures on them apart from just they were able to be whoever they were, and nobody in the school was judging them or making them feel like they had any reason not to express exactly how they felt. And that meant, you know, a little Greek rock star singing AC/DC and a bunch of other people running around with a rainbow umbrella handing out fairy bread to all of their friends. I think that we already have these values in the city, and I think that if the council wasn't taking these steps, we would actually be a couple of paces behind the community, because this is an inclusive, caring community and we need to support everybody in it.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Are there any further speakers on this? No?
Yep.
Councillor Kavanagh?
Look, I'm finding this a difficult one because there's some aspects of it that I completely agree with. Points 1, 3, 6, 8 and Councillor Bolton's point 10. The issue I do have is putting the Safe Schools program involved with it. I know that many people around the table are supportive of the Safe Schools program, and I've studied it closely, and even more since this thing. There's aspects of it that I personally am concerned with. That's a fact, so I'm finding it a bit difficult. Certainly the council resolution was unanimous, I remember at the time, about supporting marriage equality, etc. And I'm sure it would be again if it was put forward around this council again. But there's a couple again.